I'm here at Akshiva with the Levins. We're here to talk about bullying this year, the unusual confluence of marketing and coaching in their respective fields of expertise. And they're going to talk to us a little bit about how bullying can be expressed in the cybersphere and beyond, and what we can do to try and help our young people deal with this very difficult issue. So Noah, Kayla, it's great to have you here with us in that Akshiva building. You may even hear real cars going past in the background to prove that we're here. But if we're going to talk about bullying, probably a good way to start is identifying. How can we know if someone has been a victim or a perpetrator of bullying, I guess of any type, but particularly in your expertise in online?
Yeah, we can start with a definition of bullying. When we think about bullying, we're typically talking about taking a vulnerable person, right? And coercion, influence of, well, what would it be? Sorry, it's if they're being coerced, intimidated, or threatened in some way. So that type of activity towards a vulnerable population is really what we define as bullying. So cyberbullying is just leveraging digital technology, some type of technology, to effectively do the same thing that could be done offline. That would be bullying. But maybe you can speak to how would you identify that it's happening?
Yeah, so I think what you're mostly looking for is behavior change. If your child would be a victim, this is like probably the main question the parents would want to know. So major behavior changes, and especially revolving around their technology use. So if you see a kid, sort of like having a flaring temper right after playing a video game, or, extreme additional use of phone actually could be one instance, or avoidance, right? Or you see that they're a girl being very upset or not wanting to talk after being on her phone, something like that. Changes in eating and sleeping, just seeming tired all the time, being nervous to go to school. Those would be some of the warning signs you'd want to look for.
So life changes, lifestyle changes, and often particularly as it might revolve around technology, either excessive use or limited use or particular behavior afterwards. Yeah. So how can social media be particularly potent and be involved and used in the world of bullying?
I mean, one of the main, there's a couple main things with social media, which is that kids now are not just living their life, they're also managing an online persona. So it's much more focused on like, how am I coming across and how many likes am I getting? And am I getting that? Like, they're constantly getting that social interaction, that social, that ding of like, yes, I'm accepted and I'm okay. On top of that, both the perpetrator and victim, or just anytime two people are interacting online, they're alone in a way, right? It's between them and their phone. They're not in a situation where someone could call out bad behavior, where the bully might feel embarrassed to speak that way to somebody in front of other people. So there's kind of that privacy, which is also, puts it there. And there's no break there, right? There's no break from it. It can, at any time, they can check in on their phone and it can continue. So, little checks that you might have where now you're sitting and having a conversation with your parents and you're not going to see that person till tomorrow. Maybe they could process what happened that day and ask for some help. That's not really happening anymore, because it's not just a question of it happens at school and then it happens the next day at school. Now it's really a 24/7 or hopefully 24/6 situation.
So you say it affects often two people because it's private, but aren't social media apps, some of them, very public in the way they express each other? So what were you talking about when you said private?
Right. So it could be that someone can do something anonymously, right? But also most of these apps will have an option for a direct message, right? So if they're sending just a direct message, then unless the victim is confident enough to screenshot that and show that, which they're probably not, right? Because a bully is going to be pretty, they know who to target often. So then they're able to have that private conversation.
And the internet is a particularly ripe or fertile environment for bullying to thrive. And I guess maybe if we could understand a little bit about how some of these things, I know that you've worked with some of the big companies and some of their specialty is working out how to get to people for their own ends. I mean, if you could enlighten us a little bit about the technical side of it so we can understand.
Yeah, if we step back, I think one of the interesting things about the internet in general is we kind of have to step back to like its origins of what was the internet when it first started. And I don't mean when it first started, but when people started to come online and start to use it. So essentially, you had young adults and adults leveraging this technology, and it was the first time it had democratized the voice of a lot of the population. It was the first time beyond news media that somebody could say something publicly, and it could get out to literally anybody, and it gave people a voice. So what we found happening is that culturally, the internet became an outlet for people, for blogs, for different types of forms of expression. Whether it was artistic, music, or personal expression in written word, and eventually video, YouTube. And what ended up happening, as most of us that grew up with this were exposed to, is that if you went into the comment section of an article, it was never a positive place. There was a lot of, people finally had a voice, so people often use that voice to express extreme opinions or to bully. And adults were doing this. So when children grow up and come into an environment where bullying is happening already, it would be weird to be anti that culture. Like the internet in and of itself is a place where people aren't necessarily having the best mitos, for example, right? And we expect that now. That's the basic premise of what's going on. So when Facebook came into play, which was the first real social media that we think of as social media, it became a place that beyond a blogs or a news articles comment section, we began to see now somebody posted information about their life, and now the same environment where somebody felt the right to comment on that, right, was invited. Did they like it or not like it? Was there something that they had to say about the other person's celebration or the other person's news or whatever the other person was posting, pictures of themselves? Right? And beyond that, people started to now post about their lives. So you created a culture where everybody's kind of commenting about each other. So that creates an environment where, unlike before, if I didn't cross you in the street, I would never have commented on what you're wearing or what you're doing. Now, because it's posted online and I'm connected to you, I have the right to say something about it. And so it created an environment where that was very much invited. And I think today we're 10 steps beyond that, right? So we've created a place where a lot of people can interact in semi-private contexts, sometimes completely private contexts, and have a lot of information about the other party that they wouldn't have otherwise had without having been a close friend. So that in and of itself, without getting into the real mechanics, gets already a world in which bullying is very much invited, and if a bully exists, right, he has a perfect playground to affect that desire.
So really, it's so that's so interesting. Basically, you're saying that it's often, or certainly started that way, that beneath the headline, it could have been a news article, or any kind of article, underneath it was the comment section. It's often in those sections where people start nattering or talking or yapping at each other. That's when often the to and fro became more common, and then some of the more modern media apps basically became me posting things about myself or about my life, or as you said before, they don't have just a social life anymore, they have an online persona to manage or maintain. It's often then that's going to be inviting all these comments, and that's why these environments are going to be very fertile for bullying.
Absolutely, and I think it's important to broaden the definition of what social media is, right? Media in and of itself was different forms of communication, so newspapers, articles online, but that was where one party was giving information over to the other. Social media is where there's a feedback loop. And in social media, that could include things like YouTube, where you have a comment section, things like gaming. There's now a video platform called Twitch, where people record themselves playing video games and live, and people can actually comment on the video game. But even within the video games themselves, back in the day that I grew up with, before Facebook was around, right? From that comment section, there were a lot of games that were online, and there was the ability to talk to the person that you were playing with. That as well was a place where, a random stranger is playing you in chess or some board game online, and they were invited to communicate. And it was also a fertile environment for bullying of all sorts, where an individual is exposed to whoever they're playing this game with. So I think that culture shifted into a lot of different places. I would even include in social media WhatsApp, because it's a communication platform. Now we have statuses and different updates that you can have in WhatsApp. All of these platforms are different ways that we have a feedback loop, we have communication, and we're able to comment on each other's activities.
So even I call it status because I call it English, but yeah. But the idea of posting your statuses, just you're inviting people to look at what you've done and therefore share their comments, and that could also become a ripe environment for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the more, like a bully can bully about anything. He doesn't need you to necessarily post, and he is the aggressor or she is the aggressor at the end of the day. Albeit, the more information that a bully has, just like anybody else, the more they're going to have an impact on the other party. So when all of a sudden they have something to build off of, then that's where you're going to see that happening.
So you're just feeding the material the whole time, basically.
Yeah.
And in terms of like these platforms, what particular effects can they have on someone's like emotions, their psychology? What does it happen when a person starts, in your experience that you've seen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I would say that the major thing that I have seen working through high school all the way through, married and women with young children, is that when, again, that constant access, one of the things that happens is there's always a very compelling distraction available, right? We know that these platforms were designed using slot machines and the psychology behind slot machines, right? So there's that constant dopamine hit that they're looking for. And if I'm struggling I just had a conversation with somebody and it didn't go quite right, I could be stuck alone and introspect and all my difficult emotions coming up. Maybe I said something I shouldn't have said. Maybe it was taken the wrong way. Or I've got this shiny object right here. And when I pick it up, I don't have to think about that at all. And so what ends up happening is that we have a generation that is less and less capable of dealing with their own emotions, right? They're less and less able to deal with their own self-awareness, because what happens is that the less I experience my difficult emotions, the more I start to experience them as dangerous, right? I'm not used to feeling awkward in an elevator. So if I don't have a phone to take out when I'm alone with some, strangers in an elevator, then I'm going to be much more uncomfortable than if, okay, I'm awkward every once in a while. I have this experience on a regular basis. So that's going to play into social interactions. That's going to come out in your social life in general.
So if my phone, is it an escape of thoughts, I'm going to not be able to engage in normative social interactions, and that's going to weaken my ability to be more robust in the way I...
Yeah, or even just deal with themselves. The reason we're having these emotions in the first place is because there's something off, right? And instead of solving for that problem, I'm pushing it away. The problem didn't go away, didn't get fixed, right? And in addition, when I worked in elementary school, I remember one time, and I thought it was said so beautifully. The principal said to us, you have to understand, when you take away the middle schooler's phone, it's like taking their tongue for the day. And it really landed, right? It's that if this is where a person's primary social interaction is happening, that means they're not spending these years building up in-person, face-to-face interactions, learning nonverbal communication skills, right? Learning how to go back and forth with somebody, learning how to read subtext between, what someone's saying. So definitely it's going to impact in those ways too.
I would add to it, like in terms of the actual technical aspects of what's going on behind the scenes, like the reference that you were making around these Stanford researchers were essentially studying attention, like how do you capture attention? And that was the technology that was built in. So there are a lot of different studies over the years in psychology, but then more modern studies were around how do we build a habit-forming product? How do we build a technology that actually creates habits for a person? So one of the things that happens is notifications are a form of getting you back into the app once you've left. So when's the best time to surface a notification for a user? We actually found that it was better to surface a notification when it was distracting you from something than if you were bored. So if you weren't doing anything and we surfaced a notification, you'd read the notification and decide if you wanted to go into the application. But if you're reading your email, meaning you're about to do something, and then we distract you, you're more likely to actually leave and go do that thing. So you're actually creating distraction as like a basis for... So what that does is it kind of unsettles a person and gets them into a mode of kind of going down a pathway where they're kind of following the emotional patterns of what they're being told to do as opposed to what they want to do.
That's so crazy. So they're basically generating distraction. They're trying to go for that.
They'll hold back the notification until you're busy with something else and then bring the notification up.
So it's not that people became distracted by their phones because that's what people did. There was actually time and technology invested in how to go about distracting people.
Yeah, there's a position called an attention engineer is the position in these companies in Silicon Valley. are now all over the world. And their job was to, how do I capture? You have to think about what is the business model of YouTube and Facebook and all these platforms. The business model is advertising. That's where 95% of Google's revenue, despite all of the physical technology that they have and other services that they have, 95% of their revenue comes from advertising. Advertising is successful for the companies that have the most attention. When attention is your asset, right? So then you are the most successful place to offer people your inventory, right? Your real estate for where they can advertise to people because you have their attention. So what the battle was from Twitter and Facebook and Google was, how do we capture the most attention? That's why Google purchased YouTube. That's why Facebook purchased WhatsApp, because we're all in WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a platform for Facebook now, or owned by Meta, which is Facebook's parent company, that allows them to capture more of the world's attention. And what that does is essentially it gives them a platform to run algorithms that help improve, how much time they have to show people advertisements or other information. Now, the problem with that is that the algorithm, the machine learning that's behind those systems is not moral. There's nothing behind it that checks to see if what it's doing is good. It just is optimized for attention. When you feed an algorithm an output of this is what you need to do, it will do it at its most efficient rate. It doesn't care what impact is being made. The people behind it do care, but they're not actually in control. The algorithm just runs, right? So what ends up happening is in 2018, one of the things that Google found is that there was a video that was posted on YouTube that was about anorexia. That was about different forms of eating disorders. But it was a girl who was showing people how to do it. And 150,000 young women watched this video before Google noticed and took it down. So the speed at which information is being put out there or bullying is happening is faster than the people can catch it. But the algorithm has to keep going because it's being fed essentially by the information that's coming in, but there's nothing to shut it down unless you shut down the whole system, which would be bad for investment.
And they're not going to do that.
They're not going to do that.
So we were speaking before, and we said it as a joke. Talking to you guys is depressing because everyone's in this loop of distraction, and no one can function anymore properly. And it's sounds like we should throw the towel in, but we are optimistic people, and maybe it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about what methods of prevention we as families with morality, with our own standards, what we can, I say families, parents, institutions, whatever it might be, what methods of prevention are there, and what can we be looking towards to help us deal with this very difficult situation?
Absolutely.
I mean, one of the biggest things is to push it off as long as possible, right? And specifically smartphones, because once a kid has a smartphone, getting an app is such a small step. There is an organization called Mothers United to Stall Technology, where the moms get together and agree as a class not to be the first mom to buy the smartphone for the kid, right? To try and get the whole class as a group so that no one's getting peer pressure. It's a genius idea. And why is this? Because we know that the prefrontal cortex of the brain, the part that makes its decisions, the part that makes good decisions, is not fully developed until between 18 and 20, right? And so the longer we can just give them one more year to just develop that part of their brain, to be able to come back online and decide, wait, maybe I need to take a break from my phone today. Most adults struggle with this, right? So to expect a child who's not even totally online in their brain to then go online on their phone, right? And to be able to make good decisions is unrealistic. Another great solution is locations and times, right? So we already have Shabbos, that's wonderful. How can we use that in other places? So a big one is not having phones in bedrooms, and parents need to be doing that too, right? Showing that habit that you don't bring technology into your room, because especially when we're talking about online bullying, right? In the middle of the night, we want our kids alone with something where they can socialize with somebody else, right? And be subjected to that. So if we're cutting back, even once the kid does have a smartphone, cutting back on making decisions, which apps are going on, what times is the phone being used, or if it's easier for a family, just what times is the phone not being used, right? If they're just away for dinner and when you go to your room at night or something like that, right? So sort of creating those structures. A lot of places recommend having a family contract, right? How do we use our phones things like that.
Yeah,
Is really
and I think that definitely gets to delaying as much as possible the child being exposed to this challenge. I think one of the other pieces that we've talked about a lot, and we see a lot being recommended, is essentially if bullying is something that they're prone to because they are plugged into technology at whatever point that they are, it's important to make it a part of the family conversation. I think one of the things that you would never take your child and just send them out into the street and say, learn how to cross the street on your own, right? There are rules about teaching them about what a car is and how a car is dangerous and what the sidewalk is and what the street is. And we're extremely careful how we introduce our children into that environment because it's dangerous. But at the end of the day, we don't stop using cars and we don't not let our children cross the street. But we do guide them, and it's a conversation that's very open, and nobody would ever judge or be like, well, I'm not comfortable teaching my kids about the sidewalk, right? In technology, we don't do that. It's not a conversation in the home. People are being exposed to technology pretty willy-nilly, like very openly, and the parents don't know how to handle it. But what could be a huge step in the right direction is when it does need to be introduced for whatever reason, it's very important to be a part of that online world. What are they using? How is it going? You can't monitor everything that's going on. You can't listen to every conversation they're having, but are they comfortable coming to you and asking you about how to engage with people online? And if something were to happen where they say, I got bullied, somebody was being mean, right? That type of relationship with the child or any person in the family is very important. That's the only way you're going to start to notice these things. It's very easy to take a piece of technology and hide and have an entire world that you're exposed to that nobody else knows about, if that's the culture of how technology is being used in the home.
So we're talking about delaying where possible, as long as possible, maybe having agreement between the families or the parents or whatever it is involved. We're talking about trying to find times where phone use is limited, so you can have some kind of control as a family or as a unit, whatever it is about where. And I guess also part of that is showing people that you can also be without your phone and survive. You said, take their tongue away. You've got your tongue here and you've got your tongue there, and you can be in both. And then exactly this other piece about learning how to find a good way of engaging with your technology that's going to allow you to be with it. A lot to think about. And as parents, I guess we also have a role model. If we're every 10 seconds checking our shiny devices, you said before, then that's, it's difficult because we live busy lives, and our lives, I guess what you were saying before as well, by nature of the way we engage with the world, they've been moved online. I mean, I remember machines that we used to go online. There's such thing as going online now. You're online the whole time. So how do we, in your mind at least, how should be a good management as adults? Maybe we need to employ these behaviors for ourselves in general. It's healthy for us, but particularly around our kids.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to be said about this. I think one of the first pieces to recognize is how are we as adults, as parents, using technology, if we're on social media or even on WhatsApp, how are we using that? One of the things we see a lot of the times with young women in particular is WhatsApp's being used as a platform, not for direct bullying, but for excluding. I have a group, everybody in my class except for this one girl or these two girls that just don't fit in, right? So as parents, there are things that it's not hard to go online and see that parents are also not necessarily always behaving the best online in a very public way. And so sometimes children can learn from that modeling of, it's not just when they're using their phones, but how are they using their phones? What are they doing with those phones? What are the messages that are being sent to the children of like what's acceptable behavior? Just because somebody's posting information online, how do we comment or interact with that? And what do we post online about ourselves? Because that entire environment is just asking for feedback.
And I think it also provides, to try and give a little bit of a positive
yeah,
spin,
sorry, I'm the negative.
I think it provides opportunity. Every time a parent is struggling, it provides an opportunity to have that discussion openly with the child. Right. So I realized I needed to leave this WhatsApp group because it seemed like there was some Lashon Hara going on. I can say that to my kid, and then my kid can understand, wait, this is part of an online life. is to be making conscious decisions about what's good for me, what's a good place for me to be. Maybe I want to take a break. Maybe I want to go off for Elul, and I'm not going to be checking, and also just good habits, right? Putting your phone on grayscale is a great way to make it less engaging. Turning off notifications, at least on the apps you don't really, really need the notifications from. These are proven techniques to make the phone less engaging. And again, then I can have that conversation with my kid. I turned off notifications. It seems like it really helps me. I think the other thing I just want to say is that we can't just expect our children to put away their phones, to show up to dinner. We're competing with that now, right? So if I want my kid to show up to dinner when the alternative is playing video game in his room, so dinner needs to be pretty interesting. I can't just be like, I'm annoyed because you want to be playing your video game. Like, what's going on here? I need to try and bring, maybe I can't match the video game, but at least my best, right? In terms of I'm there, I'm engaging. My phone for sure isn't at the table, right? And I've thought of what I want to say to this kid, and I've, made something that they like to eat, whatever it is. We have to kind of up our game a bit.
So we have to up our offline game to compete with the online game. Okay, I think one thing we didn't touch on, and maybe there isn't, but we spoke about interventions. What if it's too late? I didn't get together with all the other parents in the class, and my kid's been on this thing for years and years, and they've got the app, and they're doing the things, and we don't have that conversation at home so easily. To your knowledge, and I know it might not be your the areas of expertise, what sort of help is there out there, or what should people be doing?
But definitely Hakshiva would be a place we would turn personally. Hakshiva local leadership would definitely be a place to look. I think also there are a lot of signs, like educating ourselves and just normalizing the conversation in our homes and in our communities so that we can start to realize when and where this might be happening. Seeing if we see controlling behavior or some of the behaviors you mentioned earlier about somebody pulling back, changing their technology use, or their reacting to something that might have happened, and just being aware that was coming up. Those are things that can be done to just wake up to the fact that most likely if somebody's online, they're being exposed to some type of cyberbullying at some level, because it's the nature, it's the culture online. So how do we just become aware of that so that we're able to react in a timely manner?
So just increasing our awareness is important, so we can at least identify the issue, and then maybe turn to what exists. I mean, we mentioned Takshiva, and we're here. Sure. And there might be, wherever you might live, there might be something similar. Definitely worth being in touch with those people. All right, well, listen, it's been a real pleasure to sit with the two of you in your respective fields of working out how people think and tick, and using that for the good. I know that you're about to combine forces on a new venture. So wishing you all the best of luck with that.
Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you very much for sharing with us.
Great. Thank you.
We just had a chance to hear from the Levins about the dangers, difficulties, and precarious situations that many young people find themselves in nowadays with social media. To see a couple that are so engaged in what they're doing and working together is a very special thing in the Jewish world and around Bet Shemesh. And stay tuned for more about the very difficult topic but worthwhile pursuit of understanding bullying.